We'll be back from the break and we continue with more of the SMB updates here on Smart Means Business. Now, looking steadily at something to do with construction of buildings in towns. Well, pretty much the situation in Africa is that some of the buildings are not having a good city plan, or I should say. At the end of the day, you get to realize there's always been a competition, by the way, between buildings that are being built during this era and those that were there since the time of the colonial masters here in Uganda. For example, these days, the buildings that are being set up do not actually stay for a long time. Either way, they start having cracks here and there. And for some of the people who actually work in downtown Kampala will actually bear with me and agree more with the fact that when it even rains during this particular period, you realize that these particular buildings do have low drainage systems or poor drainage systems, and at the end of the day you find water into buildings and all that. Then you ask yourself, who was the engineer, who was the architect, who was behind the plan of setting this up? And this is actually a very huge worry. And the explosive growth in African cities is usually a primary reference point when discussing the problems and the challenges that are faced in Africa. Like many other African cities, Kampala's growth is apparently outstripping supply, and so the city is undergoing a remarkable urban transformation. Every other day that passes by, you realize there is a building being set up, there is a road being maintained, and all that. Or there is a building that is being put down. Now, when you look at this city here, technology advancement in building techniques and technologies is as well taking center stage. But unfortunately, however, with such rapid growth in population in most of the cities, you've got to realize this is coming with a cost, and it's one of the sectors that we may not be proud of. The same buildings that are uplifting the economies are in many cases tragically taking lives of many people that are constructing them, residing in them, as well as doing business in them. So Uganda, unlike many other countries in the Western world, we are still under the developing structures, the development, and we are making sure that urbanization takes center stage, but developing is one of the things that we need to do. Now, indeed, the collapse of most of these particular buildings is not a new phenomenon, and such events have occurred since the time immemorial. So you get to realize it is not something that is new. But however, the committees in Parliament are sitting to analyze and try to bring answers to why are these buildings collapsing, or why do we have buildings that already having cracks, yet they've not even spent 10 years functioning. Let's have more of this update.
Unfortunate that the cabinet has not approved the national physical plan. They have not, and that's the reason that people are building anyhow. We have no areas for industrial areas, we have no residential areas, and as such, people just build anyhow. So we need to have the national physical plan approved. Then secondly, on the other issue, is that we have encroached on our ecosystem. We have a very vibrant ecosystem that God gave us. We have hills and we have valleys. But in the low-lying areas, we have swamps. And these swamps are very, very vital in the ecosystem, because they filter this water so that it goes to Lake Victoria clean. But all these swamps have been degraded by the so-called rich people. The mafias, land mafias, they have grabbed them and created the titles in them. They have poured mud that they have blocked the only waterways that we have to Lake Victoria. And that's the reason that we have floods. Whenever it rains in Uganda, we lose over $100 million. And that's big. So when it rains in Uganda for a year, we lose $100 million. That is quite a lot. And we must address this issue of degrading the environment. Recently, the government came out and said that they are going to make sure they evict the poor people in the wetlands and leave the rich for about 10 years. That's absolutely wrong. Leaders in Kampala basically pursue those that built in low-lying areas. They have nothing to do other than, making sure that we open. If we can open the channels, the drainage system, open the channels, create good channels. Then to sensitize our people on garbage management. garbage management. You know, when it rains here, because people have littered and thrown bottles and this and that, these will go and block the water channels, and that will create a flow back of water, which will eventually enter into the houses of our people. So we must make sure, for starters, that we sensitize our communities on better garbage management systems. Then 2, open up drains. Then 3, prohibit people from constructing in the only available waterways. Those are the swamps that we have, the catchment areas. And that's, by doing that, I think we shall have solved almost 80% of the challenges of floods. Then the other one is also to construct resilient infrastructure, resilience roads, because floods have come and floods will never go. So we must learn how to live with the floods. So by doing that, we have to construct buildings that are resilient to floods. We have to construct roads that are resilient, and that's where to go.
All right, he says we need to construct resilient infrastructure that is resilient to flooding. And because at the end of the day, you realize the reason as to why these particular things do happen is the building type or the quality of the buildings that we set up are not resilient enough to the natural calamities that do happen, or they are maybe having low resilience at the end of it all. And then that is where you find the drainage systems too poor for those particular people in these particular buildings at the end of it all. So speaking of which, if we are to look at that, there are lots of things that we need to follow up in regards to these particular buildings that end up collapsing in Uganda, and it's a very huge situation of concern that needs to be worked upon. And so that is one of the key things that we need to look at steadily, because when you look at someone saying we need to construct resilient infrastructure, now this infrastructure should be resilient enough and resilient to flooding as well, the roads themselves, because we've had lots of issues with potholes in the country, and those are some of the things that we need to clearly focus more on here in Uganda in regards to building collapsing and challenges with the infrastructure that we have in our country. Okay, now besides that, now we look at more of the infrastructure development in Uganda. This time round we get more of Uganda's bridges. There's a lot of chaos and crisis that happens that leads to disasters that definitely sometimes end up destroying the bridges in most of the areas. So here there is a situation where there is a need to fund bridges to avoid disasters coming up, but how best can we program for these particular disasters and to ensure that they do not affect our transportation systems, especially the bridges? Let's first have a look at more of this one.
In the Kasese area, for example, and in the urban area, we do know for sure, information is available for us now, we can't hide, that we are going, until the scientists change, we're going to have a lot of rain in those areas, and we're going to have a lot of landslides, we're going to have a lot of rivers moving. And so we have now, and I was thinking, for example, how World Bank and other donors would come in. One is that, for example, if you ask me, the first priority in those areas is not anymore, in my view, first of course, is not beans and maize which we distribute here. I think it is bridges. It is bridges, because how will you distribute? All bridges have gone. I was seeing the other day, Minister works in now, how will we innovatively fund the bridges? I think that we can program Minister of Finance without you getting a heart attack. If everybody agrees with our new approach, this disaster, we say World Bank, ADB cannot come to finance beans and maize. I know it. But they can come under infrastructure, and we program so that infrastructure is not a problem. Every year, we start running around looking for money from the treasury. It's becoming a press for the treasury. It can't continue. Now, we know those areas we can program. We do also know, for sure, now, areas are prone to drought. And the gentleman there from Private Sector Foundation, that small man like myself, really important of irrigation. Now, for those areas which are prone to drought, then the question becomes, how do we program to ensure that disasters don't come again because there will be drought? We do know. So what is it that we must do? That for me, coming from, on one hand I come from area which has a lot of water, on the other hand I come from area which is stressed with water. So I'm seeing what's going on. Currently now, I come from Rupunjiri where I was born, I'm still there, but I'm not from the Antoni. So on one hand, Rupunjiri, they have a lot of rains. In the Antoni, it is rain. So the question is, how do we program those prone areas? In fact, this is, if we go to table 3, so those of the plan, the plan, table 3, I think it's on page 47. You will see, these have been already programmed in the plan. So how do we program? If you ask the community is there, and all of us in water stressed areas, the game plan changes from Chijel sub-region, Toro sub-region, and Ergon sub-region. The game there is, how do we provide? We want, first and foremost, water for our animals. We want water for our crops. So prioritization must now move, and how can we rearrange the financing from government of Uganda, if it is there, over the next 5 to 10 years, to ensure World Bank, all these donors, IDB, to ensure that we provide water in those areas. Because we must move away from this short-term thinking, as if the disaster will end. Because that's what has been going on, if I'm correct. Now we want to move towards how do we investigate in the medium to long term. And so, those who are scared about money, like my Honourable Minister, I think the resources can be made available for those major.
That is the Permanent Secretary to the Office of the Prime Minister on the need to fund bridges to avoid disasters coming up in the country. And this particular funding that will be heading to these particular bridges is something that he says should be handled by the ministry, and of course also being looked at definitely, because remember, with these particular disasters, they don't only wash away bridges in most of the areas, they also wash away roads, they also end up washing away different houses of individuals. So it's some of the things that need, if we're to take back to the supplementary budget issue, these are some of the things that this budget also works upon, this particular extra funding of such situations. All right, now away from that, we get into an update regarding traffic. The traffic officers, sometimes people say there's brutality of the officers or there's mismanagement of traffic, but at the end of the day, you get to realize it goes back to the road users themselves, the motorists, for example, those who don't want to follow the guidelines. Because if at all you are safely driving on the road and you are maintaining these guidelines of traffic, then there is no way they're going to interrupt you. Just earlier on, there's something that has been trending on social media with government officials who are actually denied to go through traffic as they usually do, because for them, they think sometimes because they are late, they can easily beat traffic, even though they are quite disorganizing the flow at the end of it all. And this here created a public opinion kind of debate where people actually congratulating the traffic for stepping up this time around to at least show that the government workers are not different from the other people who are using the road, because we all have to maintain the road rules and regulations. Now, this update, we get to understand more of the traffic officers. How are they functioning? Is it the right way to do so? And are they brutal though? Or it's just a claim by the road users?
On Monday, when traffic made that operation on every matters they needed, to some of us that's okay. But right now we are complaining over the brutality. That very time as I was coming from Parliament, around the roundabout of Mulago, almost my car was really shattered, my windscreen. So we are saying it's not okay. However much we want to handle matters of traffic, it's high time as a country, and we are awaiting tomorrow the minister's response. We don't think we are cattle. We don't think that anyone is done civil. We don't think we cannot understand when a traffic policeman can stop you. But how it comes today, we are using people who are untrained as far as civil matters are concerned. How comes you have the brutality going on in such operations? So we are saying we need a demand. We are demanding an explanation from the Minister of Internal Affairs. How does he really deploy? How comes we are having people who are not worth their jobs on the road? You cannot come from nowhere, you cannot come and you are handling a very serious matter, whereas you are causing more serious problems. That's exactly what we want to be clarified on, because I'm one person who almost fell as a victim, and I could see several other people being injured because of the way they were handling the operation.
All right, some road users say that this operation was a good one because members of parliament or other government officials believe they are above the law, and so they end up misusing traffic guidelines and they will just overtake from any lane whatsoever simply because they have lead cars or they are having convoys with them, so they can easily pass through just because they have government number plates. And it's something the traffic officers, on the other hand, were not ready to buy earlier this week, and most of the members of parliament or most of the dignitaries from different government offices faced it rough. And on the other hand, Ugandans were happy for that because they believe they are also time barred at the time. So beating traffic should as well have some discipline in it. And some others were actually being told, if at all you are late for work, why then don't you wake up early to beat the traffic? And that is it for the updates this morning. After the break, we're heading on ground with Berija Andrew to understand more of what Ugandans believe should be done, especially with the issue to do with buildings collapsing and also the quality of the buildings that are being set up lately in Uganda. What way can we develop better buildings or better infrastructure for Ugandans to at least look at fostering Uganda's development? Stick around. Good morning.